Next year, 2024, in the end of May and beginning of June, there will be in Vienna the Shiatsu Summit. And it's going to be, the main topic is going to be on anxiety, trauma, and hope, and the potential of Shiatsu in times of crisis. I have the pleasure now to talk to Nick Pohl. Nick is an expert on Shiatsu and clean language. Now, Nick, the first question, so as always, what is clean language all about, and how do you use it in connection with Shiatsu?
Well, clean language is called clean language because the questions that we ask in clean language are designed so that I, as a practitioner, makes it very hard for me to bring any of my own ideas, any of my own presuppositions or unconscious bias into the client's space. The questions are all built around the words that the client has just said to me. And then I offer them back in a little well-packaged little question like, and is there anything else about that? Anxiety, whatever. And what that does for me is that it creates this wonderful space, which, you know, in Zen Shiatsu and the Zen tradition, we talk about beginner's mind, Anfängergeist, and the qualities of beginner's mind are a willingness to be with emptiness, a willingness to be simply present without any expectations about what is going to happen. So for me, when I discovered clean language, and it was sort of at the same time as I was beginning to work with Kishi and his Seiki approach to Shiatsu, they just seemed to blend so well together. They seemed to me like the attitudes and the qualities of attention that Kishi brought to his work and to being present with the other person were very similar to the qualities that I noticed in my teachers who were working with clean language. And I just couldn't resist bringing those two things together. I've been doing it for 20 years or so. And I do think it's very relevant when we're working with trauma.
And is there anything else about this relevance of trauma and clean language?
Well, for one thing, as any trauma authority will tell you, that it's very important for the client to feel that they're safe and that they're as in control of the process as they need to be. And that's an essential part of the clean approach. It's a collaborative approach. It's working together. And so obviously at the beginning, I say to the client, if you need to pause at any time, just tell me. You know, if you want to stop and take a breath, just do that. When we're working the trauma, we never know when this kind of flood of overwhelm is gonna come, or if it's gonna come, or can we take these little, say, steps, step by step, the stepping stones, the Trittsteine, into a space where it is somehow safe for that person to be present with whatever traumatic event or however they're experiencing it in their body. And that's the second key thing with clean language. We're not trying to get a person to go back into the actual traumatic event or memory. The thing which David Grove, who invented clean language, realized was that people have metaphors for that event. They may not be able to go back to it, but they will always have some kind of metaphor. It might be a verbal metaphor, it might be an image, it might actually be an embodied metaphor, a movement or a posture or whatever. But they always have some kind of way of representing that. And through these lovely, beautiful, simple questions of clean language, we can help them to unfold that metaphor. And this is where it gets really interesting, because obviously a metaphor about a traumatic event is going to look very dark at the beginning. And the temptation is to say, oh, well, that better not go there. Let's just make a note of that and get on with the shiatsu. But already in making that decision, it's possible that you're giving an unconscious signal to the client that you don't feel safe to be present with what they have to be present with day after day after day. And how can we find within ourselves those qualities of being to be present and to have the calmness of mind and the openness to actually stay with it and explore. And the thing that happens, this is what David Grove discovered, when you go into those metaphors, however dark they may seem, and you go into them with the confidence that somewhere in the body-mind system of that client, there is a knowing, there is somewhere that knows what the next step needs to be to move on from trauma. Then you discover that that trauma, that landscape, that internal representation of the trauma in some metaphorical form begins to offer some hints, some in the simplest most poetic ways which kind of cross-reference with the poetry of Chinese medicine. You know, simple things like language or weather. There's a very dark cloud, there's thunder, there's lightning, and then what happens? Oh, I can just see on the horizon a little bit of sunshine. These things begin to unfold, and then we begin to build a confidence between us, me and the client, that actually when it's possible to stay with the dark stuff, we begin to see, these are the stepping stones out of this, and to move on. That's what I would say.
Yeah, but now that makes one question is what do we need as practitioners, or as people who are in a sort of a therapeutic position? What do we need in using these questions, this clean language? What is asked? How do we need to be?
Well, that's why I think that we as body workers have a great advantage because we know in Shiatsu, we work with our body. We take time before we start to come to our sense of our embodied connection. If we're working in a Chinese medicine context, we're thinking about the connection between heaven and earth and the whole body as part of that connection, and that connection takes us into this much wider field. And that's a very strong place to begin from. It's just that language has this amazing capacity to undermine all that. Language can take us into the abstract concepts, it can take us into narrative, it can take us away from that pure embodied sense of being present with myself, being present with this other, being present to what emerges in the field between us, and being open and curious to that. So I think this is learning clean language to apply it in Shiatsu is not about having to start a whole new field of study like psychology or psychotherapy or something like that. It's about learning to ask a few simple questions and at the same time stay with that embodied presence, which you already know how to bring to the way you're present with the other person, with the client. So I think that's a great advantage, and the challenge, of course, is to get your verbal mind working at the same time as your body mind working together. But when you do that, it becomes incredibly powerful, because what you're doing is you're connecting both sides of your brain. The verbal mind that usually sits in the left side of the brain and tends to dominate our experience becomes connected with the body mind, or whatever you want to call it, which is the awareness of what's going on in our body, the felt sense of being present, which is much more in the right hemisphere of the brain. When those two hemispheres are working together, then anything is possible.
And then anything is possible. Is there anything else about this? Anything is possible.
The sense of flow between the two sides is a key feature in a lot of psychological and psycho-energy approaches to trauma, because what trauma tends to do is it splits us apart from ourselves. It fragments our sense of self. It splits the mind from the body. It splits us off from the actual reality of what's happening here in the moment. This splitting off that is so symptomatic of trauma. So anything that we can do which helps to bring those two things together is really helpful. So of course, Shiatsu, the beautiful thing of just being able to lie down and feel somebody connect with your body, and whether you're aware of what's happening or not, just getting that deep sense of someone is here with me. This is a safe place for me to be. That in itself can be so powerful in treating trauma. And, you know, the client can be doing other things, seeing other kinds of therapists at the same time, helping that. But they, you know, that what we offer in Shiatsu is so important at that deep level of what we can communicate through touch. But the thing is, at the end of your Shiatsu treatment, why not bring in a little bit of language, or at the beginning, you know, why not help bring the person out of that deep state of safety and connection, and then with a little bit of language, these simple questions help them to come to some, you know, to weave together again these two sides of the brain, the mind and the body, the heart and the kidneys, all these things, weave things together, find out what is the next step, and begin to get a sense of, yes, I do have resources. I do have resources here. Yeah.
And one more question, Nick. What will the participants of the Shiatsu Summit get from your lecture?
Well, the first thing I want people to have a safe space to explore, and this may sound very obvious, is how to stay safe when you are working with trauma. We talk a lot about how to make sure the client feels safe, but actually trauma is very infectious. Working a lot with people who are suffering from trauma, is very easy for that to enter our own field, enter our energy field, enter the body, enter the mind. And that's kind of secondary trauma is, you know, it happens to people who work too much with trauma clients. So what I want people to be able to get a sense of is how using this clean approach, the clean philosophy, this whole idea of keeping the space in some way separate between the two of us, can really enhance the sense of safety and confidence for us as practitioners. At the same time, because the client feels that they are in their own safe space and not having stuff imposed on them, there is this very different sense that, wow, somebody is actually listening to me in a way perhaps that I've never felt I've been listened to before. That creates an enormously powerful sense of trust. And trust, of course, is the other, vital resource in working with trauma, because when something traumatic has happened to a person, that their sense of trust has been undermined or destroyed. Because, I mean, obviously in a case of sexual abuse, most of it happens from people who we are supposed to trust, and that trust has been destroyed. But even in an earthquake, you know, that we trust the earth to behave itself, but it doesn't. Or you may get a sense that you don't trust God anymore. Trauma takes away our sense of trust, and rebuilding that is a very delicate step-by-step process. So that's the first thing I want people to get from this particular workshop. And the second thing is how, when we use clean language, that we can help the client to connect with their own resources and to connect with their own sense of creativity. That brings us back to the beginner's mind. The beginner's mind isn't just an empty space. The beginner's mind is that space of pure emptiness from which everything arises. And as Shunryu Suzuki says in his book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, the beginner's mind isn't just a Zen thing that you do in meditation. It's the beginning of all artistic creativity, for example. It's the space from which all creativity comes. And when we're stuck in trauma and it seems there's no way out, that is when we need someone to help us find that glimmer of creativity, that crack in the universe, as Leonard Cohen says, that the light comes in through. And it's just magic when that happens. It's so rewarding. The work is great. And at the same time, you feel that a boundary has been respected, that you are in your own safe space. And all that negative energy of trauma begins to dissolve, and positive energy, it's like the client begins to realize that they're able to bring more positive energy to the way they're living their life, and to remember whatever they need to remember from that traumatic event without it dominating their experience of life as it is lived in the moment.
So listening to you and experiencing now the energy that you were just able to submit now, I'm really looking forward to this event next year in the end of May and beginning of June, and we'll have a great experience, I'm sure. Thank you a lot, Nick.
Thanks, Philip. See you.